Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have with me today Neil Markey, who is the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats, the world's only psychedelic retreat program backed by 25 years of scientific research and an ecosystem of expertise that honors global wisdom traditions. A former captain in the U.S. Army Special Operations 2nd Ranger Battalion, Neil served in Iraq and Afghanistan before studying at Columbia University, where he struggled with depression and PTSD. This led him to explore mindfulness and psychedelics as part of his healing journey. Prior to Beckley, he was Chief Growth Officer for a 450 million private equity portfolio company and a consultant at McKinsey Co. Neil believes in the synergy between science and spirituality. So this is why he's the perfect guest for today's show. So Neil, welcome. Without further ado, let's get started.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so great to have you on. So one of the first questions I like to ask all my guests is really tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and why did you decide to enlist in the Army specifically?
Yeah, I grew up in Frederick, Maryland. That's where I am right now. It's about an hour north of Washington, D.C. It's a small town, and I was in my undergrad at University of Maryland, and September 11th happened, and you could actually see the smoke from the Pentagon at the top of the football stadium. And for me and for many others, it was a big day in my life, and I ended up joining the service, or kind of, went and did ROTC, went in as a lieutenant, and then went to Iraq once and Afghanistan twice. And, I was a fortunate one relative to a lot of my peers, frankly. I mean, had a lot of guys not make it back or get really intense injuries. And, I was an officer and was more on the planning side, so was a bit removed from the most intense, but the reality is everybody in that unit had pretty complex PTSD. You don't realize it at the time because you're surrounded by it, just becomes the new normal. But yeah, I got out in 2012 and it left some marks on me. And I found meditation, which actually was quite helpful. And then through that network and through that kind of process, I had some opportunities to have some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences, and those were incredibly meaningful for me. And so that's kind of the beginning of it all. And there's some twists and turns in there, but that's the short version.
Yeah, you know what? We're actually recording this on September 12th. So that's pretty timely that we're remembering what happened so many years ago. I was actually still in school, and I remember that day because I'm in New York City. I'm in Brooklyn, still
Oh,
am
wow.
as
Yeah.
well. So I think everybody here and in the vicinity knows exactly what they were doing the day that it happened and how it affected them personally. So much loss, and then all the after effects. Um, so I really appreciate your desire to become a patriot, right? And to really serve in that way, because even though a lot of people were affected, not everybody responded the same way, and not everybody dealt with it and contributed to that effort. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And
I
well,
mean,
and it was oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask, like, what do you think really drove you to make that decision?
Well, that, it's really um interesting and troubling, I guess, looking back on it. I thought that I was doing the right thing. I believed this, if you remember the weapons of mass destruction kind of narrative, and the whole country was united. Remember, everybody had the flags on their cars, and then we told ourselves this story that we kind of needed to go root out these evil people, or we might have something like that happen again. And I got caught up in that, and I really believed it. I think a lot of people believed it. Um, the reality was, though, is that that whole weapons of mass destruction thing and the axis of evil between Iran and Saddam and North Korea, that was all a miss. It was a complete miss, So us invading Iraq, maybe is one of the worst, if not the worst, foreign policy decision the United States has ever made. So it was, my intentions, I think, were good. They were selfless. I was trying. But by the time I got through school, got through training, got to my unit and got to Iraq, we had learned that it was all for naught. And then we had created this massive civil war there. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people have lost their lives. And Saddam was a really bad guy, but we shouldn't have invaded, you know. And so, yeah, it's taken me some time to kind of process that and come to terms with that. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being so open about the experience and how it really shifted and changed you. Hindsight is 2020, right? And your journey kind of reminds me of my general guests are actually people that were trained in conventional medicine who are kind of leaning and exploring alternative and traditional medicines instead and incorporating them in some way. So it's like that hero's journey for us as well is discovering, what everything we were taught, it's applicable in some situations, but it's not the whole
No.
story, and it's kind of disappointing and disheartening to understand that, what, we could be helping people in so many other ways than the current systems that be are training people in and sort of even I would say it's not really a brainwashing, but it is an indoctrination of a sort.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The American medical system um, has a lot of amazing advances, uh, and there's some things we just wildly get wrong. I mean, it's really unbelievable. My mom was just quite sick and then passed, and so I'm kind of in the well-being field, next to the medical field, but I got an up close and personal view of it as she was in and out of the hospital, and it was pretty unbelievable. I had these moments where I was in awe of the doctors and in awe of the technology, and she wouldn't have made it through a lot of the periods if it, 20 years ago. And at the same time, so frustrated with the mindsets and can't get fresh air, can't get sunlight. They're waking her up every hour through the night, even though she was at this point on hospice because they needed to check her vitals. And it's just like the woman needs a good night's sleep, but they're so worried about getting sued. So it was, yeah, we have a lot of room for improvement, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. When we talk about ethics and morality and integrity, sometimes it doesn't really mesh with the legal protection system, and the payment system is another huge problem as well. So, for you, Neil, how did you find plant medicine and how has that changed you?
Yeah, it was really in that transition from service time. I got out of the Rangers as a captain, and then I went to Columbia University for grad school. And by some measures, was doing well. I was at a good school. I was that first year getting good internship and job opportunities. So I was, able to kind of put on a decent exterior. But the reality is, I was struggling. I was isolating. I was using alcohol too much. I wasn't sleeping well. I was trying SSRIs, anti-anxiety medications, sleeping medications, and not having a lot of luck. Things were getting progressively worse. And and then I kind of stumbled into this mindfulness for business leaders course, really not knowing what meditation was, and met this guy who was a long-term kind of seasoned meditator. And I think he was one of the first people that was like, this young man's struggling, and he took me under his wing and started teaching me meditation and took me on some of my first long form programs. And all I can say is it's just exactly what I needed, kind of right on time. And I just had this sense that this is what I need to do. And I had the discipline. Meditation's super simple, but it's not easy. But I maybe through the military training or something, I had developed the ability to just force myself to do things, and I was able to sit and meditate. And I remember at the beginning, not being able to close my eyes and count to two without my mind running around because I was in such a state of fight or flight. Um, and and so I was practicing a lot, and over the course of a year and a half, I think I started to have some symptom reduction, sleep gets better, and then through that same network, I had the opportunity to try some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences. There's a long history of special operations guys getting these treatments on the underground, and so I was lucky to get kind of connected with that. And yeah, the first one I had was a mushroom one, and it was in some ways kind of this instant central nervous system reset. I feel like my fists weren't clenched as much anymore, kind of in reality and kind of metaphorically. And then it also felt like it was accelerating what I was trying to do with meditation. And I still could really believe that. And I think that if we're going to give people these experiences, we should be teaching these complementary kind of contemplative self-awareness practices alongside. And I think that's how you reduce risk and get the most out of it. But it was in that couple year period where I had some of my first ones, and then I've had, quite a few different experiences over the last 12 years.
Wow, it's so interesting hearing the journey, and it kind of just reminded me of a few different things. So first of all, yeah, the army and people that are in politics, even, they kind of don't abide by the same laws as citizens, right? They do have some special treatment at certain things, and maybe special access to certain things. And sometimes they're even experimented on as well. So things are just tried out. So like the Nazis, right? They were using Adderall and other amphetamines to help them focus and even be more aggressive in battle, right? And there's such a interesting history between medicines or plant medicine specifically, or anything psychedelic that is changing the mind. And oftentimes they're demonized for the citizens, for regular public, right? And only when they're prescribed, right, and they're synthetic, all of a sudden it's okay to give them to little kids. But these what's called like recreational, right, anything in the natural realm, anything that has compounds, like even cannabis, right, especially cannabis, which is that gateway drug, so to speak, even though it is really a plant, not a drug. And now we are living in a completely different era where so many things are opening up, legal like action, and just legislature is changing state by state, country by country. Things are becoming more accessible and more open. And at the same time, because it's been suppressed for so long, people don't know how to use it safely. And it is
Mhm.
so important to do that integration work. And like you said, you know what? It can be simple, but it's certainly not easy because it does require time and discipline. And that's a lot of things that we just don't do in modern day society. We're just like, go, go, go. We're programmed to just get to our highs, and we have instant gratification and all these expectations. And so we want to see these heroic results, and we go on these heroic journeys with these medicines or anything else really that we approach. And then we don't integrate, right, between those highs and the lows. And that can be really confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something that we try and really focus on is the education and I think a lot of psychonauts, the experts, would say things like the compound or the plant is less than 50% of the experience. It's so much what you do before, where you are, who you're with, why you're doing it. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, every drug or plant needs to be used thoughtfully, but these even more so. These are really powerful and have a lot of potential, but they need to be used reverently and safely, because they're not without risk.
Yeah, you know what? I always come back to the Spider-Man paradox. With great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
So it's in keeping that safety. And as a medical professional, it's that principle of do no harm. First, do no harm, right? The Hippocratic Oath. So we really want to establish safety before we even talk about efficacy. And that's the thing that I feel like, especially in America, we've been taught to think that evidence-based medicine and only things that are quality controlled in labs are things that are safe to ingest or to prescribe. And so now you're talking about a whole different world where it's plant medicine, and a lot of it is not able to be as tightly controlled. And that's the huge problem and the risk that the FDA sees with it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you handle that, and what got you into leading retreats?
Yeah. I tell a quick story real quick though. I was studying math when I was doing my undergrad, and I had this professor at University of Maryland that was quite famous. His name was Dr. James York, and he was the guy that developed chaos theory, which is, a butterfly's wings can flap on this side of the globe and it can cause a hurricane on this side of the globe. Brilliant guy. I was really lucky to have him as a professor. But he had started his career in medicine. And then he just got so frustrated and he kept this binder that he brought to class. It was this big. And in there, he had it tabbed. And he had something in a medical journal from 20 years ago, and then something that was recent that like completely countered what was thought then. They got more data or they realized there was a flaw, and you could just page through it and just see how many times we were certain, and then how many times we were like, well, maybe not. And so he went to math because he was, at least like things in math are a little bit more precise, even though, geez, I mean, math even has some funkiness to it. Um, but so yeah, medicine is it's tough. We're so complex beings and things change over time. And so to definitively say anything is really, really, really hard. Um, and how did I get into the retreats? Well, I was in grad school. I was learning about holistic well-being, meditation, plants, spirituality, and then graduated, um, and actually was so passionate about meditation, I went to Jefferson University and did a teacher certification in MBSR, and then was teaching meditation for a bit. And I was doing pretty well emotionally, spiritually. I had purposeful work. I had good, practices or rituals, meditation. I was spending a lot of time in nature. I was living back in my hometown. And you do all of these things, and then life is a lot of times more smooth, less anxious. And then I had been deferring this job offer with McKinsey and Company. And I asked them for another deferral because I was enjoying what I was doing. And they basically said, no, you either come now or we wish you the best of luck. And so I went there. And, a part of me loved it. It was really stimulating, and you learn a lot. But now looking back, that's kind of when my mental health probably started going the wrong way. It's just a real high-paced environment. It's hard to be well under that level of pressure. And then I went, but I did well there by their standards, but I was starting to slip. And then I got offered this job with a boutique consultancy that was a bunch of ex-McKinsey people that was doing restructurings for private equity companies. And it was even worse in terms of lifestyle, and I call it bare knuckle capitalism. It was pretty bad, and I'd really lost my way at this point. And at the end of that period of a couple of years, although I had done well by some measures, I was almost as bad as I was coming out of the service, however many years prior. My sleep was bad again, I was more agitated. I was, out of shape, stressed, unhappy. And I was looking around at a lot of my peers many who come from families of means and have good educations, and they have similar symptoms. and they're not war veterans. I mean, it's not as bad. But it's a spectrum. Their sleep is messed up. They're having challenging problems in their personal life, and so I just made a decision to leave and just try and find something of more meaning that was a little bit more balanced. And I got back to teaching meditation for a bit of time, and then I had had all these personal experiences over the years on different programs, some psychedelics, some meditation, some other. And and so I was kind of teaching meditation, and then people knew that I had this knowledge around where to go have these experiences. Um, and then I just kind of started to see it as I was like, well, why don't I just do more of this as my career? I love it. I'm fascinated by it. The world's opening up to it. And then the big kind of step change was I met this woman, Amanda Fielding, and her family. And she's quite iconic in this world of psychedelics. And her family wanted to run these long form programs that were a blend of science and mysticism and do at a high level of professionalism and ethically, and try and do it right, because there's a lot of the wild west right now going on with this work. And so they were looking for an entrepreneur, and I was looking for some support in a brand, and so we started working on it together in 2020, 2021, and it's been really I think it's my life's work. um, I love it, and it's challenging. It's a really complex business, but it's so meaningful. I mean, I think we're doing it really well, and for a lot of people, it's not for everyone. It's not for everything. Not everyone has these kind of radical positive changes, but many people do. Many people do have complete shifts in their worldview, perception of themselves, perception of others, the interconnectedness of things, and they go and they live more connected, peaceful, rich lives. And so it's an honor to be able to work on something that I feel so strongly about.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's really inspirational, and there's so many pieces in there that I could touch on. And, I think one of the biggest things is that this is a tool. And like you said, it's a spectrum, right? Like going from meditation, going into plant medicine in general, and then going into psychedelic. And of course, we could also talk about drugs. This is all just a spectrum that's available to us to explore our healing. And we're able to discern and make those decisions of what is calling to us. And hopefully, we're working with doctors or other professionals and facilitators that are also helping us discern in what's going to be the most positive and helpful things to us. And science, too, is a tool. We can't just rely on science alone, because science is still like an infant in many ways, right? It's still developing, still don't know everything. In fact, I think it's kind of silly to think that we'll ever know everything, because that gives us the status of omniscient, omnipotent, right? Which is not up to humans to be that. So we're using the tool to the best of our capacity. But like you said, you know what? Even math and statistical analysis can't be manipulated too, right? So to an extent, we are following the process, which is a good process, and it's still not infallible, and we're still going to be overturning some things. So I really love the blend of science and mysticism. And a lot of times, mysticism kind of just takes the place of what science has not yet explained or doesn't
Exactly.
have perfect yet, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of believing that there is this reason and rationale and explanation that we have yet to uncover. And that's what I really think mysticism does for us. And so we can follow the pattern, and then we just kind of extrapolate that pattern. And like you said, the biggest thing for people, right, in this mental health crisis that we now have, that has specifically been impacted since you started this work, right, around the pandemic time. This has been when it all kind of came to the surface for people. People have kind of been living with mental health issues for the past couple of decades, and has been, there has been such a surge of antidepressants even before COVID. But this really pushed our issues to the surface and made people want to come out and speak about it or open up about it, or at least admit it to themselves, right? Like something's not computing, there's some kind of problem. And you also touched on these two different standards that we often hold, right? That we maybe don't realize. So one is that external standard of who do I appear as, right? Am I a functional citizen in my society? And do I have the measures and marks of success, whether it's a salary or a status of some sort or family status, anything that you feel like would be celebrated by your peers in your society. And then there's the inner mark and standard of, what is my purpose? What is my place? What is my connection? And if you can't, you know, marry the two, if you can't fully express the two, there's going to be a disconnect and there's going to be a problem when these two standards don't mesh.
Yes.
And then when you just go for one standard, something is going to be missing.
Yeah. And your body will give you signals, which I think sometimes come up as anxiety, or these things that we kind of classify as mental health disorders. Well, it's like actually you're just living wrong, and your subconscious is trying to say, hey, there's something out of whack here, but we just bury it. And I really like what you said around mysticism too. And I think more people are opening up to it and having a more humble view of our understanding of science in the world, because we used to just kind of put mysticism over here, and it was, but it's just another way of thinking about phenomena that we don't have a good understanding. And there's so much phenomena. You can go into any scientific field, biology, chemistry, cosmology. If you go deep enough, you get to this point where we don't know what's going on. It's insane. And then we're sitting here having this conversation, and we're so smart, and we're so, sure of everything. And we forget that we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour on this rock and rotating around this huge ball of fire that's also rotating around potentially a black hole. And if you add it all up, it looks like maybe the speed of light. And it's like, okay, well, guys, clearly there's some stuff happening that is so far beyond our ability to rationalize that maybe we should be open to some other things that maybe seem a little magic because we can't draw a straight line. And in medicine, I mean, we see this stuff too. It's the placebo effect. We have no idea what's happening there, none. But it's real. Or doctor bedside manner, no clue, right? But it's real, and so I'm hopeful that, like you said, science is a tool, but that we can just humbly accept the fact that there's some things that we're probably not going to be able to like fully define on a chalkboard. That doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And to just piggyback off that, even drugs, right, that we do put our money on and we invest in, and there's a whole industry, and basically medicine, the medical field has leaned so heavily into the drug industry, and we use it for all types of healing, acute, chronic, you name it, right? I would say probably like 75 to 90% is like drug related, right? And which is chemical and chemistry and biology together. Right. So we don't know mechanism of action of so many drugs. Right. So we prescribe them every day. And yet for many of them, we actually don't know how they work. We just know they do. So we have to have that element of trust. And we use that trust and faith everywhere. It's not just religion, it's not just spirituality that has that. We literally rely on that in order to survive the day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm encouraged. I mean, if you look at science, like the scientific method, kind of by definition, you had to try and reduce it to a single variable. You had to isolate one thing. But I think there's more universities and research that's happening that's saying, look, that's actually really hard to do. It's actually impossible to do. You can't, because everything in some way is connected. So then let's just zoom out and then just track outcomes and not necessarily need. So like, that's kind of what, our philosophy on the program is. We're doing different modalities in the week and in the prep. And so I don't know if it's the focus on the meditation or if it's the psychedelic experience for a given individual that's producing the positive outcomes. I think it's probably them all together, right? And for some people, different modalities mean different things and have different outcomes. But so for us, we kind of just say, we know these practices are safe. We know that there's research, that supports each of them individually. But if we put them together, we can actually, have more impact. And so that's what I'm excited to be able to kind of hopefully show over time, is that these kind of multimodality approaches for people, where we try and do different things and teach people some of these skills, will have really meaningful impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently on Facebook, actually, it was probably a while ago and it was on Instagram, but I saw Gary Vee post something about we live in an and world. And I think that's what we forget about sometimes in science when we are studying just one variable. Number one, it's impossible to fully isolate, like you said. So we're not really able to study things in a vacuum sort of environment. We do the best we can, right? And then number two is, just because something works and something is the prescribed treatment, let's say, and the accepted treatment and is in the guidelines, doesn't mean that other modalities don't have a place. And just because you are prescribing somebody a drug doesn't mean they should stop exercising, stop meditating, and
Right.
stop eating well because now they're on this drug and now they're going to be fine. No, that's not how it works. It works in a holistic thing. I don't think holistic should be considered an alternative modality or a complementary modality. I think we are whole beings, right?
Right.
So why aren't we looking at every person as a holistic person, as a whole person that has their own environment that they're part of? And so we have to look at the microcosm and the macrocosm. And the idea that somebody, again, is living between these two standards of like the external reality and like how they truly feel inside, and not being to marry those two, I think we can really resolve that if we look at the way that we're ingrained and taught to view the world. So there's another graphic I saw where it said, humans right now are living in an egocentric world where we just see ourselves as a center of the universe and our own universe, right? And then there's all these things around us, including, let's say, picking a modality, right? And then we handpick all of those things. But then there's the ecocentric view where we are part of an ecosystem, right? So we are, by definition, then we have a purpose, we have a place in ecology, and it's also our place to not just take and consume, but also give back. And that is what herbalism really, truly taught me. So I can't just live in a world and just concern myself about my status and my ego. To be truly happy and healthy, it actually makes us light up when we give back, right? When we have service, when we have connection, when we have community. And it also goes back to the trust and faith that I mentioned. That is not an isolated thing, right? Maybe we can call it placebo effect, right? Maybe we can study the right and left brain hemisphere and understand how to actually maximize both, because currently we are only using like 5%, right? There's different data to say that. So, you know what? Why aren't we studying more about what we can do if we're actually powering up both hemispheres at once? Why are we just focusing on the rational side and just looking at the science when there's a whole universe out there that we're not really paying attention to just because it's not quote unquote rational, but
Right.
it still doesn't make it not there. It still exists.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so much of what you said resonates with me. And I think part of the problem that many of us are experiencing in the developed Western world is this kind of over-indexing on self. And then you go to a mental health professional and they're like, okay, well, actually think about yourself in another way. So they're kind of reinforcing this loop when actually you need to, many people just need to stop thinking about themselves and go do something for someone else, because there's actually some physicists looking at this. Nassim Haramein, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but thinks that this relationship that we have with the world or whatever, the from a physics perspective, this energetic relationship, it's a loop, so we're informing it and it's informing us. And so if we're just kind of always trying to receive, we're not you need to give too, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen some of these studies around the benefits for caretakers, how much fulfillment and satisfaction people get out of showing love for other people, and so we've got to think about that too. There's a balance between us and the rest, and it needs to be an equilibrium. There needs to be give and a take, a yin and a yang, and for us to feel healthy and whole.
Yeah, for sure. I always say there's really no such thing as a selfless act because when you are giving somebody anything, a gift of anything, you are still receiving that benefit of having somebody be grateful or watching somebody benefit from your gift. It's like a mutual benefit. So a
Yeah,
lot of times it's synergistic, it's
exactly.
symbiotic. So
Exactly.
that's what the plant world, I think, is teaching us. And like you said, we have to become a little bit more humble or maybe a little bit quieter in order to receive. And it's a little bit like, modern science says, you know what, we shouldn't go backwards to the wacky, dark ages where people just did mysticism, and that's kind of the back blow on all of this. But I believe there was wisdom in the past, and we threw baby out with the baby bathwater, right?
Yeah, I
So it's not
completely
about
agree.
really going backwards. It's about
Integrating.
reintegrating,
Yeah.
right? What was known that maybe we did throw out and we forgot about. And it's really just moving forward with all the tools that we can. And I wanted to actually, first of all, say I'm so sorry for your loss. And I understand you're going through the grieving process. But how has like having a tool like meditation, like plant medicine, helped you deal with life challenges?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it helps you, move through things from a more peaceful place. Um, and, I mean, the sadness is still very real. And I can also zoom out and look at how fortunate I am that my family's been so sweet and comes together and has like really been honoring my mom. And, um, we got a few extra months with her that no one expected. The hospice nurses called her the miracle girl. So, this is also, it's life. Most people are going to lose their parents. And I think it's just helped me have a more balanced view of the whole thing and not avert from it, but, be able to sit in it and feel it and know that I'm human and, you know, this is part of this human experience.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And if you have just one more minute, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
So, question one is, how would you recommend somebody improve their quality of life right now?
Meditation. Get into a program and make it a priority.
Beautiful. Is there like a minimum time that you would recommend meditating per day to get the benefits?
Um, I, I think, more is better, but you also got to kind of start where you are. I always recommend doing a formal program like an MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Those are 8 weeks long. Those recommend between 30 to 45 minutes a day, which sounds like a lot, but I think if you give it a couple months time where you actually start to be able to experience the benefits, you'll make time for it. Um, I do an hour a day, 30 minutes in the morning, a few during the day, and then usually before I go to bed. But everybody's different. Some people are more naturally inclined to be present, artists and creatives, and maybe it's easier for them to be in one place. For me, it's not. So I've got to work harder.
All right, thank you for that. And as far as plant medicine, are there any contraindication, anybody who should not consider trying it?
There's some heart concerns, some cardiac concerns. So if you have a history of that, you need to ask more questions. It's not that you can't. And then, any psychiatric condition needs to ask more questions. And just not that, I mean, we know that PTSD, treatment-resistant depression, looks like it can have some pretty significant positive benefit, but you just need to make sure that you're doing it in the right way that fits with kind of where you are, where our programs are non-clinical, non-medical. So it wouldn't be a good fit just because of the way that we do the work. Our work's more for people that are generally well, looking to improve, increase empathy, creativity, and things like this. So um, you need to just make sure that you're kind of choosing the right way and do the research.
Love it. Is there a minimum amount of plant medicine sessions that you would recommend to see a result? And is there a maximum? Like maybe somebody shouldn't go beyond some sessions.
Um, that's a tough one because everyone's so different. We do two on our programs. I think, I mean, many people do one and have pretty profound positive experiences. I think it depends on what your desired outcomes are or why you're doing it. But one could be enough for some people. But you know, this saying, the deeper the trauma, the more times it needs to be let go. It just kind of depends on where people are. I think that there's a max, though. I think that ultimately we want to use these plants reverently as a tool, but then kind of get back to just relying on our innate ability to be connected and meditation and time in nature and positive connections with others. And so, I wouldn't recommend, more than a couple times a year, probably. And then I would hope that that would um, become even less frequent potentially over time.
Yeah, I love it. And it goes back to the reverence and honoring the plants that you mentioned too. So we're not abusing them. And even like tobacco, right? Look at how the tobacco industry abused that plant. So once you rely on it too much, it doesn't become helpful for you in most cases.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, so thank you for sharing. And lastly, what's like a fun fact about yourself that maybe people don't know about?
Fun fact. Um, well, I've been splitting the year between the States and Costa Rica, and I'm a beginner surfer. And just, I mean, if you can spend more time barefoot on the beach or in the salt water, that is a good place to start for improving well-being for sure.
I love it. Yeah, the ultimate bliss. So, Neil, thank you again so much for sharing
Thank
all
you.
your wisdom. And please tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you, learn more about the retreats, any special events that you have coming up. Please tell us.
Yeah, if you Google Beckley Retreats, Beckley Retreats will come up. I also encourage people to just check out Amanda Fielding. She's just the coolest and a really amazing woman um, that has, partnered with us on this work. And then we do twice weekly Q&As. You can also sign up for a one-on-one call. I mean, we're a relatively small company, so I mean, we'll make time. We know it's a big decision and people have lots of questions, so we'll make time. And then we actually did a code for your listeners. So it's FORK 500, FORK 500, and you can get $500 off a program in Jamaica or the Netherlands. And um, yeah, you can reach out if you have more questions. We'd love to connect.
Awesome. When is your next retreat or program?
We do about two a month, 2 to 3 a month. And so we've got some in Jamaica in October, and the Jamaica is pretty magic. Jamaica is it's a really beautiful property we have there, and the Jamaican way with this work is really special too. It's very artful and colorful, and um, people have pretty amazing experiences there.
All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that code for the listeners. Thank you for your time and your work, and I wish you a great week ahead.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.